Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is Red Lines. And you know what? Some of you really cross them in these comments. So here I have with me my colleague Henry, and I guess today we're going to be finding out how far one can stretch my mental health and how healthily I can respond to some of these crazy narratives. Give it up for Henry.
Well, I'm the Russian troll tonight. I'm the one out. I mean, that makes two of us. I mean, it's hard to read, but it's interesting, actually. And we have to. Well, let's just start.
Yeah, let's
get
start
on.
this one-man play.
I mean, Teen Valent. That's a nickname. When I'm reading this, I will do it. I'll do my best to read it in Russian English.
Okay, let's do it.
Ukraine blackmails the EU by order of its US masters.
Okay.
Well, it's just the first sentence. I have a lot to say. Well, anyway, then. Fico and Orbán, quitting that Russian English, Fico and Orbán are wise and brave European leaders. Yeah, are you all right? Maybe a glass of water? US masters also ordered the Ukrainian suicidal war with Russia. If it's that suicidal, how they can... All right, no, man, it doesn't matter. Ukrainians should ask whether US is friend or enemy. Full stop.
Oh,
Right, so let's...
I like the
Split
little
it by
special
point.
effects there.
Yeah, exactly. So Ukraine blackmails the European Union by order of its US masters. This is the absolutely Russian narrative, and it successfully lives in internet and in people's head. Is that right?
I mean, yeah, a lot of Russian narratives successfully live on the internet and in people's heads because they kind of put out contradicting narratives to sort of to appeal to a person. So, like, if there is a lot of different points, a lot of different takes, one of them is going to be relatable to you, and that's why Russian propaganda is so successful. But honestly, I don't even know where they took this point from because Ukraine has not blackmailed the EU in any single capacity. It's sort of like, we go from Ukraine is like begging for money and no one's giving money to Ukraine. Everyone's tired of you to Ukraine is now blackmailing the EU. I wish I could
Transnistria
respond.
oil thing, that might be the reason for that. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
I mean, if they're mentioning Orbán and Fico, then maybe, but the point is that if Ukraine has Russian gas flowing through Ukraine, then Russia is making money off of Ukraine, which makes absolutely no sense for Ukraine that is currently being fully destroyed by Russia. Also, this whole point of Russian gas and Ukraine blackmailing the EU through it is kind of unreasonable because all of these countries, like Hungary and Slovakia, they've had 3 years to prepare. And the rest of Europe has found ways to reserve natural gas somewhere else and to figure out their supply chain. The only reason that Slovakia and Hungary didn't do that is not because they couldn't, but because they don't want to. So it's not Ukraine who's blackmailing the EU, it's Hungary and Slovakia who are blackmailing the EU because they're doing Putin's bidding.
But look, Fico and Orbán are wise and brave European leaders.
Oh yes, Fico, as in like that same guy who is in the same party as Pellegrini, and Pellegrini is the president who is being hated by his people already, and it hasn't even been a year, I believe, that he's been in the office, and he already has a lot of turmoil, and his people are very against him because of his super contra-Ukrainian views and because of a lot of really shady stuff that he's really been doing. So yeah, I would not necessarily take a man's word for it whose nation hates him profusely and profoundly. But yeah, that's just me. And Orbán, well, Orbán, my favorite person, Orbán.
Fico and Orbán are still wise and brave European leaders. Let's imagine that all the leaders are same brave and wise. What will happen to the European Union? It will belong to Russia by now.
Yeah, I mean, if all of the European leaders were as wise and as
Brave.
patriotic and brave as Fico and Orbán, then it would be the Union of United Russian Satellites, not the
Absolutely.
European Union.
Well, what I like about these type of comments, that they are not stretching the logic of this comment anywhere else but to this very moment. They're not even considering that the war has started like 10 years ago, at least, if we're not taking that Soviet Russia was the enemy of Ukraine.
Yeah.
And Soviet Russia, by Putin version, is still the enemy of Ukraine. They're not taking all that. And that's Ukraine blackmails the EU by order of its US masters. Why, if we Ukraine blackmail the whole European Union, why we're not doing that successfully.
Yeah, especially if we're doing that through the U.S. And also, why would Ukraine need to blackmail the EU through the U.S. if in this particular scenario, the U.S. is the master of everyone, right? And everyone always says that the U.S. calls the shots. So why would the U.S. need to do something through Ukraine if they could just call the shots and order it themselves? Kind of makes very little sense.
Very. Let's pass on to another comment, which is about Video Zelensky versus Fico, Slovakia, Russian gas gamble ends in crisis. Photos 2363. The nickname is 3 days ago, and the comment is very important point that video didn't touch on. It's very important. Fico and Orbán have power to veto propositions of EU in favor of Ukraine if they choose to. This could produce far more severe consequences for Ukraine, written UKR, than cutting off electricity. Also, he could send Ukrainian people to Ukraine for conscription or halt their benefits. Much luck to Ukraine to get rid of Zelensky and find solution for peace. This is lovely comment. It wishes good to Ukraine.
No, it doesn't.
But no, of course not.
No,
but I mean,
it doesn't.
in a way,
it pretends like it's wishing good to Ukraine, and I actually despise these comments more because I think that they're trying to play devil's advocate and they're trying to play neutrality, which makes them seem a lot more unbiased and a lot more believable. And
to whom? Come on.
Well, to the people reading
to
them,
their
right?
audiences, right.
So it's a target
that
audience.
much is true, right.
Like, that's the thing. It's like, you said that these comments are not stretching reality by anything but 10 minutes from now or like this very moment, but that's because most of the people reading them are not going to be going and researching when the war started and when these things started. I mean, I find it really funny that the main point here is that, if we allowed the EU to do what the EU wants and give Ukraine all these weapons and stuff, the consequences would be far more severe than just some rolling blackouts. So, I mean, no, they would not be, because it's unreasonable to say that the only things that we're experiencing are rolling blackouts when we don't have electricity after missile strikes. That's not how missile strikes work. It's not like, they just hit a power grid and a power line cut off and boom, we don't have electricity. No, buildings are being destroyed. People are being murdered with these missiles. Drone debris and missile debris fall all the time. 3 days ago when I was coming back from Lviv to Kyiv on a train, the first thing I heard as I pulled into Kyiv was a massive explosion, and it was actually a couple of minutes walk away from me at the Solominska train station, which is a place they've been hitting 7 times at this point. I drive past it every day to work. I drove past it today, and it is every building on that stretch is ruined. It looks like Armageddon. If you're in America and you've been seeing or experiencing California wildfires, this is how some places in Ukraine look like. So when you say the consequences would be far more severe, what's far more severe than waking up to buildings being set on fire by a massive explosion, by a 100-ton TNT falling on it from the sky? So that's kind of a funny little thing that they're trying to minimize the suffering of Ukrainian people that we go through because the EU doesn't give us what we need. The suffering, in fact, and the consequences would be lesser if we had more missiles to intercept these things, more air defense systems to intercept these things, and, long-range striking capacity to be able to destroy warehouses where these missiles, these murderous missiles,
depots,
are being held before they can even be shot at us. So that is really not a reasonable point. And the Zelensky situation, Zelensky is not the one who attacked this country. Zelensky is not the one who is ordering the killings, right? It's not getting rid of Zelensky, it's getting rid of Putin. There is this narrative flying around that Zelensky keeps sending men to war to die. Well, yeah, of course, there are people going to the front line and they're dying defending from the attack. It's blaming the victim,
exactly.
And it's blaming the victim organization for standing up for itself. It's kind of like if there is a cyber attack and the CEO drives all the resources to repel it, you're blaming the CEO for burning the resources to repel an attack that would destroy the company. It's well, You know, they could
But
either
it's
do.
easy. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but it's easy to do that. It's easy to do exactly that, to blame Ukraine for the for that terror, because it's Zelensky. The Putin is a great Russian culture, right? It's a great Russian whatever.
Yeah.
He just invaded to give good things to Ukraine. And we, for some reason, these bloody goddamn Ukrainians, they don't want to lay down and die already.
But that's
Oh
the
my
whole
God.
point, right? Like he came to make lives better.
Right.
Then why does Donbass look the way that it does?
That is a big
why,
question
Why
in
is
the sky,
everything
right.
completely ruined? Why are people, having? Why is the entirety of Ukrainian population experiencing PTSD? Because we do.
I know. I live there too.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things where we have collective trauma, and we live in I guess not I don't want to call it safety, but relative safety compared to
It
like
is. It is.
eastern and
Right.
southern parts,
Right.
right? And it's really upsetting to read these types of things because we did not choose to be in the war, but we do choose to stand up for ourselves, because if Putin were to come here and there wouldn't be men dying at the front line or women dying at the front line or people defending our country, then it would be much worse. We are trying to avoid the Holocaust here, the Holocaust of us.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I can't agree more. But it's a genocide, and it's a genocidal war. And people, when I keep on repeating that story. I was in Bucha when I see that pit in the ground full of dead bodies, and the bodies, the hands were tied back behind their backs because, like, these soldiers were afraid of just usual, people walking down the streets, and they killed them. And
They weren't afraid of them. They're just,
they killed them because they are Ukrainian. It was my first impression, because
Yeah.
why would they tie their hands behind their backs? Women and men.
because they can.
All right, that's what was exactly the whole point. And in the end, just because I don't think that Putin called them and said kill every Ukrainian in Bucha. That was a deliberate action, but
Yeah.
the whole nation wants that. It's okay for Russians to see the atrocities, the killing, the murders, the tortures, and the outrageous suffering. It's the deliberate, I don't care, from the Russian
Yeah, that's
nation.
the thing. It's like the justification for that is like, oh, well, they're Nazis, right? Sure. I mean, like
That much
the
is
bogus
true, yeah.
idea of Nazis and everything, but like there is a woman walking down the street. Like there were lots of victims that were children and women and like young boys and stuff. So like you are a strong Russian soldier with a rifle in a tank, and there is a civilian woman who's like, I don't know, 30 years old or like 40 or 50 or like whatever, who clearly is not a match to you for strength and for equipment. She's just walking down the street. Why are you killing her to protect yourself from her? She's not doing anything. You could have literally just kidnapped her, right? As in, like, you could have tied up her hands behind her back and set her on the
That
like.
also doesn't make any sense. But all right.
But
well,
I'm trying to say, like,
okay.
if you're saying
killing
like,
is even right.
no, what I'm trying to say is that like you could, if you think that she poses danger to you as a Nazi, but she's unarmed and can't do anything in the moment, then like you arrest her basically. And that's the most of it, right? I'm not advocating for that to be done either, because she's a civilian and there is absolutely no reason to do this. But point is, why are you tying their hands behind their back and executing them? Because they don't, realistically, there is no danger being posed to you for you to justify that.
Absolutely. Well, let's step back from these comments a moment. What do you think? What is the reason for this hatred? What it is
The reason,
inside the Russian nation that makes them hate Ukrainians so much?
what was the reason for Germans in Hitler's Germany to hate Jews so much?
So what is the reason?
I mean, well, I guess this example was bad because I kind of shot myself in the foot here. Hitler affected a couple of generations, right? I mean, there's still obviously people that follow the Nazi ideology. Haha, we saw that yesterday at the American inauguration with Mr. Billionaire-in-Chief, but I digress. There are obviously still people that follow the Nazi ideology, but they were fed a certain system of beliefs, and they believed it, and they acted upon it, right?
So that's belief. That's more like religious belief that the Ukrainians.
Yeah,
and
it's
that's
kind of
it.
like a cult. It's like kind of like a cult belief, right? But the problem with Russia is that this belief did not just exist for like 20, 30 years and was implemented into the Russian lifestyle for 20, 30 years. That's been going on for centuries. That's been going on forever, you know. You could say that, oh no, Russia had no reason to hate Ukraine because before like 2014 when the coup or like whatever they call it, right, happened, which is also not true. But then why did I come to the U.S. in 2011 and all of the Russians were making fun of me and like looking at me as if I was lesser than because I'm Ukrainian, right? Like why were they mocking my I don't know.
Accent?
Not even so. Unfortunately, confession here. I don't really have an accent in Russian. I have a very, very like proper St. Petersburg accent, because my grandfather is a professor, and generally I'm very prone to languages.
Right.
So it's easy for me to mimic the accent,
Right.
like a
My
native
thing
accent.
too, right.
Yeah. So I don't necessarily have an accent in Russian, but I said some words that were wrong. And it was almost like they were waiting for me to screw up so they could make fun of the like, you know, little village Ukrainian that doesn't know how to speak Russian. And it was like six months into me studying with them in the same boarding school, right? Like I spoke.
So these were students.
Yeah. And I spoke English, which is the language of the United States where we were, right? Like much better than all of them combined.
Obviously.
And this was the thing that we all needed because
Well,
we were
that's-
in an American school, and
Right.
that, you know, didn't
Well,
count.
the reason
but the
is
fact,
obvious. You are better than them. This is why they hate you.
But the point is that, you know, when I said one word wrong in Russian, that became my nickname, and I was like mocked for it for the next like 6 months. And
Of
it
course,
came
this
up
is
everywhere.
exactly the reason. All right,
So
well,
what's
maybe
the,
this
you
is
know-
also the reason for the entire nation to hate another nation, because Ukrainians, this is the smaller nation, a smaller
Yeah.
country living better.
Because you're
in
threatening
the-
to them, but not in a NATO basis on your border type of
Here we
things,
go.
but as in
Right,
like
that's a
they
threat.
are threatened by you because you are doing better. You know, Russians have been taught their entire lives that they're like chosen by God and all this stuff, right?
Well, they're not the first. They're not the only
Yeah,
ones. You
exactly.
know, Gott mit uns. We remember that shit. So
Exactly. But that's the point. They were taught that they're chosen by God, and then they look at their little brother, and the little brother is not chosen by God. And somehow, you know, we have electricity and we have like modern comforts, and you know, there are companies that are thriving out of here, and Russia
and that
can
is in
only
small communities,
Yeah,
far
and
away from the
here-
center.
And here is an interesting difference, right? It's like if you look at Ukraine today, even though everyone is like, oh, Ukraine has no history, no culture, like no whatever, because Russia destroyed it systematically. But like if you look at like Ukraine today, we have PayPal, we have Grammarly, we have MacPaw, we have all of these like innovations that also serve worldwide, right? Like PetCube, Ukrainian Camera,
True.
like these
Yes.
super cool companies that are like that are used in mass market every day, and they come out of
Dia is-
Ukraine.
it's-
Yeah, but this is inner Ukrainian. I'm like
All right,
talking
okay,
about
no, the worldwide, all
world
right,
market.
okay.
Yeah, and all Russia can show for itself is poets that died like 300 somewhat years ago.
Far more, yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
because like sure you have history and culture because you didn't
We're
destroy.
not using it.
because
They're
you
not using-
Yeah, you appropriated it, but the point is that like what can you show for yourself today? Because you keep talking about this like great culture, but
Back
like
then.
what's happening today? Because today I cannot name a single thing that Russia did that's like, wow, well this is development.
Putin. That's the thing. All right, let's get back to muttons, let's call it that way. Mortar blunt is the nickname.
Okay.
We're talking about, right. We're talking about the video. It was an exclusive on UATV English. It's degradation. There is no chance to survive. Russian POVs.
POWs.
The POWs, right. Sorry. BMW. Okay, fake. I'm reading the comment. Yeah. Fake. He's wearing the Ukrainian collar band. We're talking about the
POW.
POW, right. The Ukrainian collar band, and he's wearing a Ukrainian uniform. All right. He has no Russian identifying badges or patches. We also don't have name tape. We're not even in the middle of that. We also don't have a name tape. So we can't see if he's the Russian army is like far away in the galaxy, far away, but it doesn't matter. See, if his identification is written in Russian or Ukrainian, that means that this mortar blunt understands the difference between
Between
Ukrainian
Russian-
and
Russian.
that much is clear. Point. Full stop. You're going to love it. Arestovich did say you guys lie a lot. How did he know? Oh my God. Did say you guys lie a lot. What he did not mention was that all the practice doesn't necessarily make you good at it. Do I have to be that?
I don't think you need to. I don't think you need to. I think that the only point in this comment that I'm going to draw from is Arostovich, and I'm sure he would love that as a narcissist. But so Arostovich is this figure in Ukraine that for some reason has been dubbed all over the place, especially in foreign media, as the former advisor to the office of the president. So I would like to say that he has never had an official job with the government. I don't know, we none of us understand how in general he was able to be around the people in the government and use their office to record his little messages, right? But advisor to the office of the president is not a real position that's available in Ukraine, because you can be an advisor to the president, you can be an advisor to a presidential aide, you can be an advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, you cannot be an advisor to the office because it's an inanimate object. So this was never a real position. It was just something that he made up and no one really clocked him or checked him on it. Arostovich fled Ukraine for Europe, or I think he was in Israel first, and then he went to Spain, and then like he's just like kind of, you know, jet setting around Europe because obviously all that Russian propaganda money. Here's the thing that Arostovich does. He made himself famous online through doing psychology courses and talking about being a therapist who is like a psychotherapist and does psychoanalysis. He has no formal education in psychology. You cannot, and as someone who does have a bachelor's in psychology, you cannot do that because reading 3 books does not make you a therapist and does not make you qualified or certified to do these types of things with people, because that's damaging because you don't know what you're talking about. He sells courses online to men, similar to Andrew Tate's, where he quite literally tells you to berate women and that women are lesser than, and that you should use force to women, and basically it's just like a misogyny galore, right? This is how he appeals to the male population of his viewers. And then his second gig, which is getting money from the Russian propaganda, for the Russian propaganda that he spreads, is literally just saying whatever it is that Russian propaganda says on the news and saying that, yes, sure, this is true because I was at the office of the president. So realistically, while I'm really mad that no thorough sort of investigation has been done into how the hell did he even end up being in the circle of people who was allowed into the office of the president in the beginning of the full-scale invasion.
This is very strange.
But he has made his entire career pushing Russian propaganda. No one in Ukraine, in the country, Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-speaking, anyone with a brain does not listen to this guy because he lies all the time, and he makes his money on selling a course that tells men to beat up their wives and to berate women to feel better about themselves. Quite literally. He calls himself a psychologist without a diploma. I mean, this man, it's so funny when he says you guys lie a lot, and he uses his like credential of being a Ukrainian to like prove it. He has been shunned out of this country after people got too tired of him constantly like putting in little crumbs of Russian propaganda into his videos.
Little?
Yeah, into his videos of
Well,
you know, addressing the
little
Ukrainian nation. Yeah, he started with the 80-20, you know, it's like it was 80% pro-Ukrainian and then 20 little like pro-Russian crumbs that he was planting in people's heads. He is...
Wasn't that obvious, Yulia?
Oh no, to me it was obvious. I hated the man from the very beginning, but like, but you know, as in, I understand the people that were listening to him because he was like doing his job right in terms of like, you know, Russian propaganda, but he was like calming people down, and he was sort of like creating this image of a big brother where like, you know, these terrible things are happening, but everything is going to be okay. And he was just sort of this comforting figure that people needed to listen to know that everything is going to be okay. And that's how he gained trust. And that was his strategy in gaining trust of the nation, by like being this like, you know, creating a space for them to be comfortable.
Right, so now he's abusing that trust. And,
of course.
And we're talking about people that are listening to Aristovich, though, because I have, in each and every comment, I have 8 or 7 comments here.
Yeah, you said there were many comments that mentioned Aristovich.
3 or 4.
And you were so like, you know, you were so fuming about this. But the thing that I want to mention here, right, is that anytime you see Aristovich mentioned in comments, he does not have content in English. He does not produce any of his propaganda content in English. He does not produce any content in English. His channel is in Russian. So how on earth does a random American, Brit, German, whatever, knows of Arestovich? Because it was brought into you and translated by Russian bots and by Russian propaganda for you to know. So yeah, just pay attention to that, you know?
To a simple fact, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to give you a choice. Forced military draft, or generic Russian propaganda.
Forced military draft.
All right.
Hit it. Hit me.
Ooh, it's going to hit you hard. Lurkling X is asking or writing, I don't know.
Lord of the Rings?
Lurkling. Take a look at that. Oh, you're
Lurkling. Oh my God,
Lurkling.
he's lurking. Okay, so a stalker. Go ahead.
Yeah, me too. So many don't want to be in war with anyone, and they will choose not to. I'm reading a Shakespeare here. And yet they are forced. My heart goes out to them, all the people from different countries being sent in to die. Like, he's not even...
The cringe I'm experiencing.
Right. The leaders who do these are horrific. The amount of death and destruction and ending of lives is hard to even fathom. End of story.
Cool.
Yeah, right. So you can have your second. I mean...
No, I don't need a second.
All right. Here you go.
I have it. I mean, I have to respond to these types of things so often, but no one wants to be in war. I don't want to be in war. Henry doesn't want to be in war. Every single operator in this room, and there are 3, also don't want to be in war, okay? We really liked our lives before there were missile raids, air raids at 5 in the morning, and before there were things exploding around us, and before major Ukrainian cities were taken over and ruined, and before, you know, millions of people were displaced, and before so many people went to Europe to live there to feel safety, and before women were SA'd by Russian soldiers and had to give birth to their babies because they were evacuated into Poland, and there is no, abortions are forbidden, you know, and before some kids lost their limbs, and before half of our nations, well, not half of our nation's men, but before so many men and women went and lost their limbs at the front line, and before we had to do funerals every day in every city, before all of that, before Mariupol was a graveyard, you know, we liked the life before that. We did not choose war, but we choose to defend ourselves from what Russia brings. Russia comes in and does all of these things, right? Russian soldiers torture, assault civilians. They behead POWs and castrate them. Russia sends missiles onto our peaceful cities at night, cities that they supposedly don't want, right? Like Kyiv, Lviv, like why? What's there? That's not a Russian-speaking land to free from Ukro-Nazis or whatever, right? So what are they doing there? Russia destroys cities completely, like Avdiivka, Bakhmut, Pokrovsk. I can name so many. And you think that we're not going to stand up and defend ourselves from that? You think when that comes to us, it's going to treat us better than it did when it was bombarding us? Because the idea was that they're coming to liberate us, right? But they're not, and they're just destroying the Ukrainian Nazis, right? How do they know? How does a rocket know whether in this particular building there is Ukrainian Nazis or the poor little like Russian oppressed people that need to be saved? It doesn't. And Russia doesn't, and they don't care.
Exactly.
They don't care because there is no Ukrainian Nazis. It's just Russia that wants to destroy and fully and completely exhaust us from all of the resources. And that's the thing. So many don't want to be in war. No one wants to be in war. Some people choose heroically to go and defend their country, and some people still don't want this war. They still don't want Russia. If they don't want to serve, that does not mean that they want Russia to come and take over. That just means they're scared and they don't want to go to the front line because that's a normal human reaction. And yes, sure, most people are freaking scared. And if you don't have a general draft and general conscription in a country whose entire existence is being threatened through an existential war, and you don't forcefully conscript people, then you are just going to die. And if these people don't go and fight for Ukraine, they're going to end up fighting for Russia. So they're still going to end up fighting, but now they're going to be taken over and invaded. And now they're going to be filtrated and tortured and whatnot. So the thing is that when people use this stupid excuse of like, so many don't want to fight, no one wants to fight. People at the front line actively fighting don't want to fight. The people that don't want to fight do not think that Ukraine should be defeated and the war should be over by negotiation and surrendering territories and, Putin coming in and becoming the ruler of all. They don't want to fight because they don't want to physically fight because they're scared. But they still want Ukraine to be Ukraine.
I believe this is the best answer I've ever heard on this topic, and thank you so very much. You almost brought me to tears, actually.
No. Do you want a tissue?
Yeah, I have one. I was ready for that, but in a good sense, it brought me to tears because you were very emotional and very true and very educated in all these things, and especially and specifically in the pain of the Ukrainian nation that you feel, and I hope that our red lines will be able to share this. And not this bullshit that I read, because I don't like it, I hate it, but I'm still reading through it because people on here are arrogant bitches, wherever the sex they are. But they still think that these comments can change anything in Ukrainian heart, in Yulia heart.
It won't.
It
Absolutely,
won't.
it won't because I live in it.
But I think they understand that. Are
our
they paid?
Responses might change the minds of people that read this
Hopefully.
and might
I
sympathize
hope
with this.
so
Because
very much.
unfortunately, a lot of these are bots, but unfortunately, a lot of these are people. They're real people. They just don't, they've been fed a lot of propaganda.
Right.
Sometimes they're Russian
Brainwashed,
people that
right.
pretend to be Americans. Sometimes these are just people that are hateful and they don't care like a lot of these comments come from people. It's not even that they love Russia. They're just hateful. They just want to hate on something, so they picked Ukraine to hate on. And it's
They just want to pour the hatred somewhere else.
And it's so sad because, I genuinely, I know, I don't come across on any of my channels, personal or professional, like someone that you can talk to, right? Because I'm very set in my beliefs because I really do know what I'm talking about here, and I am kind of I'm passionate, right? So I come off as maybe a little bit I wouldn't say that your average, person with an opinion that differs from mine it would be very happy to try and address me. But what I do want to say is that for all of those people that are just hateful and hate Ukraine for no reason, if I had all the money in the world, I would invite you to come here, because if you came here, you would understand how wrong you are. Because Ukrainian people are welcoming, Ukrainian people are lovely, Ukrainian people are helpful. There's so many foreigners that come to this country and they come here to volunteer initially and then they stay. Henry is from Latvia. And then they stay here for their entire life, because this is the thing. Ukraine is not a nation that was pushing out other people. Ukraine is not a nation that was hurting anyone. Ukraine is actually, we're kind of like this little excited child who is like, oh my God, these people come here and they like us. They like it here. Oh my God.
Absolutely. I like that attitude.
Yeah,
I really
exactly.
love it. And you're like, I was ready to spend a month or 2 or 3 months volunteering here, and then I found a year passed, and then 2 years, and then so 3 years in a row I'm here. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere already. I think.
To be fair, I understand you on that, because I came here to volunteer for a month because I've lived in the U.S. for for over a decade, right?
Over a decade,
and I came here for a month, and then I ended up actually moving here. Here we are.
Yeah, in this very studio. Right, but some people may not understand anything about Ukraine. But there is Sergei Sergeyev, 7564,
Oh, yes.
who's ready to explain.
Who's also so unbiased, Sergei Sergeyev.
Well, he is the unbiased himself. He's the lord of unbiased thing. Sergei Sergeyev says, "Can't you understand? I'll explain it to you, my dear."
Did he call me my dear, or was it from a
no,
different
he calls me my dear. It doesn't matter. In 2014, there was a military coup in Ukraine. You were talking about that just recently. The government, which was elected by the people, was captured. Mind the English. Was captured by internal aggressors.
Okay, so before you continue this comment, I'm going to address this one immediately.
Yeah, let's do it pound by pound.
First of all, for a coup to happen, you have to have a power take over a power. So there was an election in Ukraine after this supposed coup. So it's not like a power came in and took over. Ukrainians then voted for a different president. Also, for a coup to happen, there has to be a violent takeover of the government. Yanukovych fled before anything even happened. He fled to Russia, and he's been buddy with Putin and living in Rublyovka in somewhere in Moscow. Rublyovka is kind of like Greenwich, Connecticut of Russia. So he has been living a very cushy life with his friend. There were students peacefully protesting outside just because, we'll get there, but there were students peacefully protesting outside, and then there were trained special forces sent to beat them with batons and shoot them with rubber bullets. That is how you handle a peaceful protest.
Oh, absolutely, because the power, I mean, the authorities were probably frightened.
And
these are students, after all. They can do
there
what?
were like 100 of them or something.
Yeah.
So another point here is that the democratically elected president, which is referring to Yanukovych, that was then couped, right? So yes, he was democratically elected, but how was he democratically elected? His platform was running on uniting the differences between Russian and Ukrainian speakers. We never had differences before that. He created them and he decided to solve them.
Such a uniform, right.
And we were like, oh, we need to be united. Okay, well, we like uniting, right? So then his other part of the platform was that he was promising us he would take us to the EU and separate from Russia. He ran on the platform of pro-European integration. And then when it came time to sign the agreement for the European integration, like it's like a pre-agreement, right? He went there while the whole nation was expecting him to sign this agreement because that's what we kind of agreed upon, right? And he declined to sign it, came back and said we were going to join the CSTO, which is Russia's faux NATO. And so the people came out and protested because that government and what he was doing did not represent the will of the people, and it did not represent what he promised to the people. It's not a coup when you stand up for yourself. It's, it's illegal and borderline fascist when you start shooting students and beating them up with batons for holding you accountable for your actions and for being a fascist and a dictator, because when you dictate to your nation what you want to do
that makes you a dictator.
Against the will of the people, you're a dictator. So yeah, that was not a coup. And also, again, for a coup to happen, you have to have one power take over another power. There was no military involved in any of Maidan protests or the Revolution of Dignity. It was the people armed with makeshift Molotov cocktails. And I don't know, some of them were wearing pots on their heads as helmets because obviously they were not professionals in any way. And yeah, no one came and took power away from Yanukovych and into their hands. No, we actually had a combined presidency of three of the former presidents before Yanukovych together that were taking the post of the government while we were preparing an election. And Ukraine voted democratically again.
You know what people were going to say about your very detailed explanation about whether it was a coup or it wasn't a coup, and they're going to say whatever. Because Sergei Sergeyev's audience doesn't like to think about that.
No, they don't. Sergei Sergeyev's audience likes to scream coup.
Absolutely. So, and he's explaining,
cool
and now he is even brave guy who explained it to us. Because we are his dears. Right.
Yes, also Sergei Sergeyev has never been to Ukraine or to Maidan. But he knows.
That much is clear.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. And I wish I can meet him here. Well, but doesn't matter. Let's go on further with this comment. The government, which was elected by the people, was captured by internal aggressors. These are Ukrainian people.
The Nazis, yes.
Nazis and Ukrainian aggressors, internal. And later, these aggressors, Ukrainian people, seized all government institutions. Fine to me, but all right. They began to imprison everyone who disagreed with their takeover of the country. Are we talking about Russia now?
No one imprisoned anyone. Actually, yes, we did put on trial and imprison the special forces police units that took the order from the president to shoot people and
So they should have disobeyed that order.
Yeah, well, to beat
Obviously.
students with batons, like what the hell? And this is not like he deployed the National Guard. It's like what do you mean? You don't do this. You're here to serve and protect the people, not the president. against the people. But anyway, so yes, those people were put on trial, but everyone else, oh no, they ran like rats from the sinking ship. Like really, there were no politicians that were buddy-buddy with Yanukovych who were left. They all fled immediately as they figured that he's fleeing. And, well, no, some were left. Some were left because they were kind of like, ooh, like Medvedchuk and other
right,
people
well-
that kind of stayed here that didn't take public parts in in doing anything wrong to the people during the Revolution of Dignity, so they could stay here and manipulate the narrative.
Maybe Sergei Sergeyev is one of them.
Sergei Sergeyev is an idiot.
But Sergei Sergeyev is 7'5", 6'4", not idiot.
He's not 6'4". He's like 5'2" and has a very small masculine energy.
All right,
Anyways.
I'll leave it. Jesus. We're not even half through this command, and we're already
I'm
dissecting
already losing
Sergei
and I
Sergeyev.
already need a therapist. Like,
Yeah, the Bachelor comes out. There were two regions. I'm reading.
Yeah.
There were two regions of the country that rebuffed them Ukrainian people.
yeah. Ukronacys, yes.
Yeah, and began to resist. These are the regions of Luhansk and Donetsk, of course. The imposters in power in Ukraine attacked them with an army, and a war began between them. I'm reading the chronicles of the Lord of the Rings here.
Yeah.
Later, these regions asked Russia for protection, and imposters, just another sentence, and imposters in power in Ukraine began to say that they were at war with Russia. Since then, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, it literally says that.
Oh, Ukraine in air quotes.
Yeah. Well, this echo. Ukraine is now Ukraine is okay. Is entirely to blame for this conflict. Ukraine is entirely to blame for the criminal invasion of Russia of Ukraine.
Yeah, Ukraine is entirely to blame for Russia coming in and killing people in Ukraine. I mean, I love this narrative of like Donetsk and Luhansk wanted it because Russia really tried to push it really hard, and they tried to push it
Successfully,
super
yeah.
hard in like other regions of Ukraine too, to create tensions between people. But I'm going to ask the editor that we have here to put a picture of Donetsk in 2014 on screen here.
Yeah,
And
please
I
do.
think that'll explain a lot to you. I would also like to show you Donetsk before 2014 and Donetsk after 2014 and Donetsk today. And I'm actually personally going to go find videos of that so I can demonstrate to you how flourishing it is under Russian control. I also want to point out that Donetsk and Luhansk did not want it, did not ask for it. Millions of people fled when Russia came because they were terrified and didn't want to live under Russia, obviously. And Russia brought in people from different regions to come and pretend to be Ukrainians and walk around with flags of DNR and LNR, which are things that didn't exist then. So how did they preemptively have these flags, right? And then convince the world that, these are breakaway republics. And also, why is it that every country that Russia spreads its grabby hands onto always has a breakaway region? Always. Also, here is like just international law, right? So if you consider yourself a Russian, there is a country called Russia, and you don't feel safe somewhere, you move to that country.
Amen to
You
that.
move to that country, and that's what you do. You know who doesn't have anywhere to go when they don't feel safe? It's like if you're a nation, a separate nation, which means you have your own customs, your own language, even if it was erased, your own identity, right? Like your own sort of traditions. Buryats, Kalmuts, Talmuks, Dagestanis, Chechens. Well, those people within Russia, the separate nationalities within Russia, they have nowhere to go if they don't like Russia because there is not a separate country, Kalmykia, Buryatia, and all of that stuff, right? So they're kind of stuck, right? And they would need to create a nation state to feel safe in it. But Russians have a nation state, a huge one, with so much territory where they have to go. Russia doesn't need more territory or more cities to, accept people that don't feel safe because they're being persecuted. They just go to Russia. But they don't do that. You know why? Because it's a bullshit excuse. Because if Russia cares so much about the oppressed Russian speakers and oppressed Russians, then aren't Buryats Russians? According to, it depends on whether it fits their
No,
narrative
they're
or
not,
not,
because
right?
they're dying here in,
Yeah, but
in
here's the thing.
thousands.
They're Russians
tens
when
of
it fits
thousands.
their narrative, and they're not when it doesn't fit their narrative, which is every
Great
day when they need to
example.
get like
It
when they
is.
need to get benefits and support from the state. Where do these people go when they feel persecuted and terrified? Nowhere, because there is no Buryatia, there is no Kalmykia, there is no any of these nations, because Russia appropriated them.
And this is
and
exactly what
absorbed them.
Russia wants to do with Ukraine.
Exactly.
Russia wants Ukraine to be another non-existent state of Buryatia,
Yeah.
Kalmykia, and
Yeah.
without no language and with a puppet administration. That's it, to deliver its great Russian spirit of
So
whatever, Pushkin and Tchaikovsky.
I
It
think
has
that
nothing to do with
maybe this is enough mental torture for today.
Just last poetic command that you don't need to answer to, very short. The forest was shrinking, but the trees voted for the axe. Because the axe was clever, it was sane axe, clever and convinced the trees that she was one of them, she, the axe, all right, since her handle was made of wood. Ukraine and the US relationship in a nutshell.
I think this man or woman either read too much Dostoevsky or wants to be them, and that's my final say.
Dostoevsky.
It's a little too poetic. Well, I mean, Henry and I are gonna go get ourselves a therapist. You know, because if we're
They're
gonna do this
really
with you
hard.
guys every week here, then we might really need that. In the meanwhile, I will ask you to subscribe to this channel, you know, so we can get more people watching, so we can get paid more, so we can afford a therapist.
Exactly. That's one. And one point. Well, the other point is to make it more outrageously interesting for us. Pick up a comment that you find outrageous. Russian propaganda, generic
Yeah,
Russian
actually,
propaganda.
this is a fantastic idea.
Right,
Why
and send
don't
it over to us.
why don't you guys email us your comments that you find very
wanna be
interesting, and we
commented,
will
right.
actually take them for next episodes, and we will break them down. So in the meanwhile, if you want to do that, and obviously if you want to hear the responses, you have to subscribe to the channel, and you have to turn on your notifications to not miss it. You have to like the video, because why wouldn't you like the video? And you have to send it to a friend, because why wouldn't your friend like the video? Anyways, if you've already done all of these things, you still have one thing to do. Please comment your questions, suggestions, and constructive criticism, because we love it, and we will absolutely read it and hopefully include it in the next video. See you next time.